Доброе утро.
Good morning.
Здравствуйте, дорогие друзья.
Good morning, dear guests.
Мы открываем нашу
We
третью
are opening
московскую
our third
международную
Moscow
конференцию
International
по
Conference
противодействию ксенофобии, антисемитизму и
combating
расизму.
xenophobia,
Защитим
anti-Semitism and
будущее.
racism, protecting the future.
И нашим первым спикером
Our
онлайн.
first
У нас
speaker
впервые проходит
online.
конференция
This
в
year,
гибридном
for the first time,
формате.
we
Ее
are
смотрят
running the
люди со всего
conference in
мира
hybrid format
дома.
with people all over the
И
world
также мы
watching it at
находимся
their
в
homes,
Москве, в гостинице
and
Украина.
us
Нашим
being here
первым
at
спикером
the
станет
Ukraine Hotel.
министр
Our
по
first
делам
speaker
диаспоры
is
государства
the
Израиль,
Minister
господин
for Diaspora Affairs
Nahman
of the
Shay.
State of Israel, Mr. Nahman Shay.
Good morning, friends. Good morning from Jerusalem. While I wish I could be with you in person, I'm honored to join you virtually. Thank you, Mr. Yury and the Russian Jewish Congress for the invitation. Next time, I promise to be with you. The theme of this conference, Protecting the Jewish Future, is both timely and crucial. Today, our people are challenged by equally pressing internal and external forces impacting our future. Internally, we are tasked with developing creative solutions to inspire and educate our rising education. We have to invest in the future of the Jewish people. We are called upon to rethink and recommit to the bonds and to us as Jewish people in the spirit of our common destiny and our collective dream to build a shared future. Externally, hatred against the Jewish people spreads online, in the streets, and elsewhere. Online, in the streets, and anywhere we are walking in the streets or using online communication, we are engaged with anti-Semitism. This is a new phenomena that we have to pay attention to and find ways to combat. This is a kind of new anti-Semitism. The lines between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism fade by the day, putting Israel at the center of this fight. Friends, taking on these challenges requires confidence, vision, and collaboration. The State of Israel is here as your partner. My office, the Diaspora Ministry Office, is ready to invest more than ever before in the education and well-being of European Jewry. We aim to make these investments based on the recommendations and requests of European Jewish leadership and communities. And I call upon you to be in touch with my office and to present your recommendations, requests, and issues with us. Additionally, as Diaspora Minister, I see myself as your representative in the government of Israel. I'm here to listen and reflect your interests and needs within Israeli government.
And tomorrow, within the framework of this conference, we'll have a roundtable of philanthropists to combat xenophobia. The people who are representing many ethnic groups, many religions, people who finance the programs to combat xenophobia. We'll try to create a framework within which we can exchange opinions and share our experience inside, because actions go after money. Money is important. It is important that we have here with us our esteemed guest from the United Arab Emirates, who created the first Holocaust museum in Arab countries. Please welcome him. He came here to this conference in general, but we're able to create together with the Tolerance Center within the framework of this conference a special session dedicated to museums which are combating xenophobia around the world. We'll have 16 museums from 14 countries of the world. Altogether, we are waiting for the representatives of 41 countries. We believe that that this conference will be successful. I see many people who have been at the first conference. I would like to welcome them with my special greetings because consistency is very important for us. Those who supported us initially will be always invited. I am very glad to see the representatives of many religions, Russian Orthodox, Muslims, and we hope that the result of this conference will be a better life for us, or at least for our children, for sure. Thank you very much, and I wish you a successful conference. Let's count the break on anti-Semites. And I have an honor of representing our guest of honor, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation, Sergey Vershinin. Thank you. Good afternoon. I was waiting till the microphones are on. I hope they won't fix it because I hope to have a more intimate talk. I'm going to say an official speech going from my heart, bottom of my heart. I would like to welcome all the participants of this conference, the third Moscow International Conference combating anti-Semitism, xenophobia and racism. It is a great honor for me to read the greetings by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation, Mr. Sergey Lavrov. Greetings to the participants and organizers of the conference. Russia historically has been developing as a multi-ethnic state in which for centuries the representatives of different ethnicities, cultures and religions have coexisted peacefully. The improvement of interethnic peace is one of the priorities of our policy, and we are ready to share our unique experience with foreign colleagues. Unfortunately, a number of states of Europe, first of all in the Ukraine and the Baltic countries, the manifestations of nationalism, anti-Semitism and Russophobia are on the rise. They are engaged in open propaganda of hatred and increasing the activity of the radical activity. That causes the worries, the attempts to break the society based on ethnicity, religion, and nationality. This requires special and urgent measures from the international community, and Russian diplomacy is ready to cooperate with everyone, including the Jewish communities of Russia and other countries. I believe that your conference will facilitate the mobilization of efforts to combat every manifestation of racial and ethnic intolerance. I wish you every success. Lavrov. On my behalf, I would like to add that it's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to leave the conference. I know you'll be working today and tomorrow. And it's great, it's normal, and it answers the spirit which we would like to see in Moscow and in Russia, and the signal that we want, the message that we want to send from Russia. It is very important for us, it's significant for us. I have a written speech which I didn't want to read because the atmosphere here is so creative and so normal, so good. And it's written in my speech that according to your estimates and our estimates, as of today, anti-Semitic manifestations are probably at their lowest today through the entire history of Russia, and comparing to the other countries, probably too. In Europe, on the contrary, there is a number of such manifestations which concerns us. In Europe, we see the manifestations of intolerance, Russophobia, especially such countries as the Ukraine, unfortunately, the Baltic countries, Poland. This is the reality. It's reflected in mass media, online, and I believe that this is something that we should clearly state our position against it. We should manifest our position against forgetting the lesson of the Second World War. There are very few people left of those who actually fought the Nazis or survived the Second World War. And any revision of the Second World War, its results, it's going on. And it upsets me. As personally, probably for us it's especially painful, and Mr. Putin many times spoke on this. It's not a political address, it's just a pure human reaction. And the way the Victory Day, May 19th, celebrated in Russia and in Israel, it's a good indicator of the fact that it doesn't become history. This event should not become the past. And today, we will speak here about the Holocaust. And yes, we have to discuss the Holocaust. It's the general tragedy of mankind, of entire mankind. First of all, Jews, but the entire mankind as well. It should never be repeated. And it reminds us of the eternal values which are forever alive. So this meeting, in my opinion, meeting of people who share a common opinion is very important. We try to facilitate it officially in the diplomatic circles. You know that Russia, time and again, has submitted for the consideration of the General Assembly of the United Nations a special resolution. It's a long resolution on combating the glorification and praise of Nazism and any other manifestations of race intolerance such as anti-Semitism, xenophobia and others. And we do it time and again, but it's very important. This year, 121 countries voted for it. It's a good result. So my question is, what about the other countries? What wrong do they find in this resolution? What wrong do they find in the facts that are absolutely normal for any normal politician, any normal person? It's something to think about. And it's political circles should think about it as well as the general community. Everyone who is in charge of ever-changing political weather. It was a great honor for me to convey the greetings by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Lavrov, and wish you successful stay in Moscow and successful conference.
Спасибо большое, Сергей Васильевич.
Thank you, Sergey. Can you hear me? I'm now worried if you can hear me. Our next speaker, Mr. Kairat Abdrakhmanov, OSCE High Commissioner for National Minorities.
Ваше превосходительство,
Your Excellency,
уважаемые господа послы,
ladies,
я вижу очень много своих коллег
dear
по
ambassadors,
цеху,
I see a number of my colleagues,
уважаемые представители духовенства,
dear representatives of religion, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants
этой конференции.
of this conference.
Мне выпала честь уже во второй
It
раз в
is
течение этого года
honor for me for the second time this year to visit the Russian Federation
в любимой нами
and
всеми
our
Москве.
beloved Moscow.
Регулярные
Regular
встречи по
meetings
линии организации по
within the framework of
безопасности и
the
сотрудничеству
OSCE
в Европе с
with the
российскими
Russian
официальными
officials
лицами,
and
представителями
representatives of
национальных
minorities,
академическими
academic circles,
кругами и
and
неправительственным
NGO
сектором
sector
свидетельствуют о том большом интересе
confirm the great
к
interest
конструктивному
of your
взаимодействию
country to
с одной из
constructive interaction
крупнейших
with one of the largest
региональных организаций
regional
мира, какой является
organizations of the world,
ОБСЕ,
such as
которая,
the
я вам напомню,
OSCE,
охватывает
which, let me remind you, geographically
пространство от
spans
Ванкувера
from
до
Vancouver to Vladivostok
Улан-Батора.
and Ulaanbaatar.
Вот это стремление к конструктивному сотрудничеству
I'm
со
sure
стороны
that this
Российской Федерации
desire for
И это я
constructive
с большим
cooperation on the part of
удовлетворением
Russian Federation
хотел бы
is
сегодня
something that I would like to
отметить.
commend.
И также хотел бы выразить уверенность, что
And at the
Российская
same time, I would like to
Федерация
express
продолжит поддерживать ОБСЕ
say that I'm sure that the Russian Federation
чтобы
will
роль
continue to
этой
support
уникальной
OSCE
площадки только возрастало,
to increase the
в
role
том
of
числе
this
при
unique
обсуждении и
platform,
принятии практических шагов, направленных
including
на борьбу
in the
с
discussion of practical
антисемитизмом,
measures to combat
расизмом
anti-Semitism,
и
racism,
ксенофобией.
and xenophobia.
В этой связи разрешите поблагодарить Российский
Let me
еврейский конгресс
Thank
и за созыв
the
столь
Russian Jewish
представительной,
Congress
уже третьей по
for
счету
convening
международной
such
Московской
vast
конференции
conference,
по
the
защите
third in the
будущего.
row,
Мне очень
Moscow
приятно
Conference
находиться
Protecting the Future.
среди столь
It is my
уважаемых коллег
pleasure
и
to
хотел
be
бы
here among the distinguished
воспользоваться
colleagues,
этой
and
уникальной
I would like to use
возможностью,
this
чтобы
unique
поделиться с
opportunity
вами своими
to share with
наблюдениями на
you
тему,
my observations
которой
on the
посвящена эта
issue
конференция,
to which
и
this
которая
conference is
непосредственно
dedicated
связана
and which is
с мандатом
directly
упомянутой выше должности
related to the mandate
Верховного комиссара
of the High
ОБСЕ по
Commissioner
делам
of the
национальных меньшинств.
OSCE
Как вы
for the
знаете,
affairs of
почти
ethnic
30 лет
minorities.
назад, это
As
было
you
в
know,
1992
almost
году,
30 years ago, in
государства,
1992,
участники ОБСЕ создали
the member
Институт
states of the
Верховного
OSCE
комиссара
have
ОБСЕ
created
по делам национальных меньшинств.
institution
Этот-
of the High Commissioner
Эта
of
должность была
OSCE
создана
for
для того,
Minority
чтобы
Affairs.
был учрежден некий
This
инструмент
office
для
has been established as a
предотвращения
tool
конфликтов
to
на
prevent
самой ранней
conflicts
стадии
at their earliest
конфликтов с
stage,
участием национальных меньшинств.
to prevent
Хотел бы
ethnic
сразу оговориться,
conflicts.
так же, как и
I would
в
like
Российской
to
Федерации, так и во многих
mention that
странах-участницах ОБСЕ термин «национальные
in the Russian
меньшинства»
Federation and in many
применяется,
OSCE
так же, как
countries,
и в моем родном
ethnic minorities
Казахстане. У нас
term
нет
is not used.
большинства населения,
In
меньшинства,
my
мы все равны, и живем
homeland in
в
Kazakhstan,
больших
we do not have
разнообразных
minorities or
обществах,
majorities, we are all equal.
уже на протяжении, ну, если уж
And-
не столетий, но
and
уж точно
will
на
live
протяжении многих десятилетий
in
славятся своей толерантностью
tolerant
и
society
недискриминационным подходом
and non-discriminatory
к этническому
approach to
многообразию своего
ethnic
населения.
diversity
Так
of
вот,
its
тогда, в
population.
92
So
году,
then,
это я
in
напомню, это
1992,
было,
and let me remind
сами
you,
вспомните, это
and you may
непростой
recall
период,
yourself, it was a difficult
это
period.
распад бывшей Югославии,
The
дезинтеграционные процессы и распад здесь, в нашей части света
the decay
Советского
of
Союза.
former
Так вот,
Yugoslavia
тогда
and former Soviet Union.
государства-участники
And then
ОБСЕ
The
предложили
member countries
Верховному комиссару
of the
по делам
OSCE,
национальных
OSCE
меньшинств, а эту должность
suggested
тогда занял
to the High
известный
Commissioner
голландский
of
государственный
OSCE on
деятель,
Minority
бывший министр
Affairs,
иностранных дел этой страны, господин
and which at that
Макс
time
ван
was
дер Стул.
occupied by the
Было
former
предложено,
Prime Minister of the
чтобы
Netherlands, Mr.
Верховный
Max van der
комиссар
Stoel.
уделял особое внимание всем
And they suggested
аспектам
that the High Commissioner should pay attention, special
агрессивного
attention to
национализма,
every aspect of aggressive
шовинизма,
racism, nationalism, xenophobia, and
антисемитизма.
anti-Semitism.
И таким образом
And
защита
therefore,
и поощрение разнообразия
The
в
protection
обществах
and
стало
encouragement of
неотъемлемой частью
diversity
мандата Верховного
became
комиссара
an
и
integral
всей
part of the
организации
mandate of
по безопасности и
both the High
сотрудничеству
Commissioner and
в
the
Европе.
entire OSCE.
Уважение к разнообразию является
Respect for
отличительной
diversity
чертой
is a distinguished
инклюзивных и
feature of
сплоченных
inclusive
обществ. Эти
and
выражения мы
coherent
используем
societies.
часто,
We are using
когда
these
обращаемся к
expressions very
первоистокам
often when we
мандата Верховного комиссара.
turn
Однако
to the
разнообразие,
origin of the
которое
mandate of the High
является
Commissioner.
реальностью для
However,
наших обществ,
diversity, which is the
последнее
reality
время
of our
толкуется
society,
неоднозначно
recently
и все
is
чаще воспринимается как источник
understood
напряжения в
ambivalently
обществе.
and very
По
often
моим
is
наблюдениям, это
viewed
проявляется
as the source
двумя
of tension
различными,
in the
но
society. In my opinion,
взаимосвязанными путями.
it is manifested
С одной
in two
стороны,
different but
замечаем, что в
interrelated
регионе
ways.
ОБСЕ
On one
растет
hand,
число
I see
проявлений
that in
дискриминации и
OSCE,
насилия,
the
совершенных
number of
на почве
manifestations of discrimination and
ненависти
violence
по этническим и религиозным мотивам.
based on hatred, on ethnic hatred and religious motives.
Только усугубила
COVID-19
эту
pandemic
тенденцию.
has
Во время
increased
этого
this trend.
глобального кризиса мы
During this
наблюдаем
global
опасный
crisis, we
рост
see a dangerous
теорий
growth of
заговора,
the theory of
которые
conspiracy
имеют
theories,
разные
which
ксенофобские, во
sometimes
многих
have
случаях
xenophobic
антисемитские
and in
мотивы.
many cases anti-Semitic
Пандемия
motives.
также возродила старые
Pandemics has
предрассудки и
also
стереотипы
revealed old
и даже
prejudices
придала
and
им новый
stereotypes
импульс
and gave a new
из-за
impetus to
широкого
them.
использования
due to
непроверенной информации и
Vast
средств
usage
онлайн-коммуникации.
of
В то же время
unverified information
отмечаю, что
in mass
хотя многие
media.
государства и
At the same
пытаются
time,
выполнять
I
свои
have to state that
обязательства
despite the fact
по
that many
укреплению
countries are
уважения
trying
к
to fulfill their
разнообразию, их
obligations
усилия
to
не всегда приводят к желаемому
support
результату.
diversity, their efforts
Многолетний
sometimes
опыт
do not
Офиса Верховного
give
комиссара
the
ОБСЕ
desired
по делам
result.
национальных
A
меньшинств
multi-year
показал, что
experience
политика
of
и
the High
законодательство
Commissioner of OSCE have demonstrated that the politics, which is not taking into account the rights of minorities, are detrimental for social coherence. On the opposite, such policy creates political and social climate where polarized debates and the usage of history as a political tool is increasing discrimination and decreasing the unity of the society. Dear conference participants, based on the experience of my predecessors, I would like to emphasize several trends to successfully manage diversity in our societies. First of all, we have to speak together against any manifestations of any forms of discrimination or behavior which is based on dangerous stereotypes. That includes the adoption of a large spectrum of measures, starting from general legislation to fight discrimination and providing real equality in the society, including the inclusive social climate for all the vulnerable minorities in the society. If we want really to prevent xenophobia and anti-Semitism, we have to develop a long-term strategy oriented on the eradication of the deep reasons for these negative manifestation. Therefore, my office have selected education as one of the priorities, because you will all agree that education is one of the most efficient tools to promote diversity and to combat stereotypes which are leading to intolerance. I would like to use this opportunity to pay your attention to the Hague recommendations about the rights of national minorities for education. Third is that we have to timely recognize hate speech and to identify hate crimes, because they are manifestations of the future possible conflict. Therefore, we have to combat hate speech wherever we encounter it. Today, we encounter more and more often the hate speech in social networks, which become a ground where hatred is flourishing. In February 2019, my office has published Tallinn Recommendation on National Minorities and mass media in the digital era, and I would like to suggest this document to your opinion, because it gives practical recommendations to the countries how to use mass media, including digital mass media, as a tool to combat, to prevent conflicts and to create integrated society. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to abuse your attention and your time. So in conclusion, I would like to emphasize the fact that the vast spread of anti-Semitism, xenophobia, racism, and other forms of discrimination in our societies is a reminder that we should take more and more efforts to protect and promote diversity and increasing the unity in our societies. Our common responsibility lies in taking concrete measures on combating anti-Semitism and any other forms of discrimination. Therefore, I would like to mention that the Russian Federation has collected a vast experience in work in this respect, both in official organizations and government and non-governmental organizations. And the Russian Jewish Congress today is providing a unique forum for us today, and we are going to follow closely the discussions and the results of this conference. And here, both the OSCE and the High Commissioner on Ethnic Minorities, as one of the tools and institutions, and I would like to remind of this largest regional organization, we are ready for further cooperation with you in order to protect our common future. I'm wishing you, Mr. Kanner, and to the entire Russian Jewish Congress, and to all the participants of this conference, and to all the organizations which have supported the Russian Jewish Congress in making this initiative real. I wish you every success in all your endeavors. Thank you for your hospitality. Please take care and stay healthy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdrakhmanov, for your kind words. Thank you for your trust. And let us try one more time to connect our online speaker. I would like to introduce Věra Jourová, Vice President of the European Commission for Values and Transparency.
Good morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to be here today. And I am very pleased to address you in this conference on this very important topic that I keep close to my heart, a topic that, unhappily enough, is increasingly relevant. Because indeed, xenophobia, anti-Semitism and racism are on the rise globally. Our societies are challenged by those who portray the other, whether different in color or religion, as something dangerous for the mere fact of being different. History has taught us that it is more than a slippery slope, and the European Commission is determined to use all its tools to roll back such forms of hatred. Let me illustrate this by using the example of anti-Semitism. The Shoah, in which the Nazis and their collaborators murdered 6 million Jews, remains an indelible stain on European history. It was anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust, and if we are here today, it is because we know that anti-Semitism is not a thing of the past. Quite to the contrary, it is being expressed again in an overt and shameless way. While it starts with apparently innocent words, anti-Semitism ends up being lethal, and as the recent anniversaries of the attacks on the synagogues in Halle and Pittsburgh reminded us. Anti-Semitism comes from all strands of society, independently of origin, upbringing, or education. It goes against everything the EU stands for, against our founding values of human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and respect for human rights, including the rights of persons belonging to minorities. Yet an EU survey has shown that 4 out of 10 European Jews have considered emigrating outside the EU because they do not feel safe in the EU. It is simply not an acceptable state of affairs that EU citizens feel obliged to leave their home countries. It is therefore right for the European Commission to table its first ever EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life last month. With over 70 initiatives, we hope to work towards putting an end to anti-Semitism in the next decade. The strategy is founded on 3 pillars on which the Commission will take strong action. First, it's preventing and combating all forms of anti-Semitism. Second, protecting and fostering Jewish life in the EU. And third, education, research, and Holocaust remembrance. I will not go exhaustively into each of the pillars, but let me mention briefly a few elements of what are we trying to achieve. Concerning the preventing and combating all forms of anti-Semitism, we know that the internet is the #1 entry door for bringing anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred to our living rooms. And indeed, 9 out of 10 Jews feel anti-Semitism is most visible and problematic on internet. A strong response is needed from the European Union to ensure the internet becomes a place where we all feel comfortable. The response is threefold. Ensure member states use the full force of the law, adopting and enforcing stricter rules for platforms, and strengthen users and boost capacity among NGOs. I want to stress that the EU is the first continent which introduced the legislation against hate speech online. And this legislation is called Digital Services Act, and I do hope it will be adopted by all three co-legislators next year in spring, so that it comes into force already next year. As regards the second pillar, protecting and fostering Jewish life, ensuring the security of the Jewish community, just like of all citizens, is the responsibility of the member states, and we expect all of them to meet this responsibility. But the Commission will support member states by doubling EU funding for projects aiming to better protect places of worship, with 24 million euro in the next year. Jewish life should not only be protected, it should be allowed to flourish. Despite the long-standing presence of Jews in Europe and the essential character of Jewish culture for European societies, people have remarkably little knowledge of Jewish life and Judaism. 7 in 10 Europeans say they are not informed about Jewish history, customs, and practices. Together with the Jewish communities, the Commission will develop an awareness-raising campaign and take action to foster Jewish life, culture, religion, and heritage, including through financial support for projects. And finally, the third pillar is about education, research, and Holocaust remembrance. To shape Europe's future, we need to understand our past. Knowledge about Jewish life, anti-Semitism, and the impact of the Holocaust on the Jewish people are essential to understand anti-Semitism today and prevent such atrocities from happening again. Today, just like we teach the importance of the French Revolution for the European continent, every child in Europe should learn the universal and alarming lessons of the Holocaust. In addition to what we do within the EU, we have the ambition to lead the global fight against anti-Semitism. The EU will work closely with Israel and other partner countries and international organizations to address the problem. The EU will use all available tools to call on partner countries to actively combat anti-Semitism, taking into account the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. We will financially support actions aiming to combat anti-Semitism in all partner countries and aiming to safeguard and revitalize Jewish heritage worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, together with EU and partner countries, with cities, institutions, civil society, and of course with the Jewish communities, we want to address all forms of anti-Semitism, ensure that the Shoah will be remembered and not distorted. We want to see Jewish life flourish across the continent and beyond. The final sentence of our strategy reads, now the quote, "Europe can only prosper when its Jewish communities prosper too." End of quote. Fighting against anti-Semitism is fighting for democracy, for our common values, for a resilient, open, and diverse society. And the European Commission will systematically speak up when it comes to anti-Semitism, be it in the EU or outside of it. I encourage all countries to do the same. We owe it to the victims of the Shoah and also to future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Jourová. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
And now we are going to proceed forward. Our program has changed a little bit due to a technical glitch that we experienced earlier. And right now, we would like to apologize for the technical glitch, and I would like to give the floor to Konstantin Kosachev, Deputy Chairman of the Federation Council of the Russian Federation.
Добрый день.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this seminal event. I would like to thank the organizers for having raised this issue. I would like to thank the organizers for expanding this conference year from year. Anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and racism, that is something that we should talk about. And of course, we should approach this problem from different angles. So let me start from anti-Semitism, and then I will talk about xenophobia and racism. About a month ago, I was a representative of the Russian Federation at the International Forum, Remembrance of Holocaust, and countering anti-Semitism. It was a conference that was held in Malmö, in Sweden. The conference was attended by foreign ministers, presidents, vice presidents, and it was a wonderful platform for a very interesting dialogue. And the reason that I'm talking about it is because this topic became relevant to me not at the conference in Sweden, but rather in a big auditorium right next to the main auditorium in Sweden. So I asked a waitress to help me, and she saw my badge that said that I come from the Russian Senate. So we started chatting. It turned out that the waitress used to live in Russia. She used to live in the town of Tula, and she migrated to Sweden 15 years ago. And she was Jewish. And you know, it was really interesting to hear that she said that she really regrets being a waitress at the conference on anti-Semitism. And I asked why. And she said, I'm really afraid. I'm afraid that in this Swedish town of Landskrona, I will experience persecution. And by the way, Landskrona is the first city in Sweden where the number of migrants exceeded 50% of inhabitants. So the Jewish Galina tells me that she was afraid of persecution because she was part of the conference on anti-Semitism. I was quite shocked. And that's when I went back and started paying even more attention to the talks delivered by the delegates, because I realized that anti-Semitism in Europe is not diminishing. On the contrary, it is really increasing, and some Jews have started migrating out of a number of European countries. So the renowned delegates who spoke at the conference explained this by saying that it happens because of a lot of hate speech on social media, because social media allows people to disseminate hate speech quite unchecked. You probably remember before social media, if people wanted to express their anti-Semitic views, what could they do? They could publish a brochure or maybe write something on a wall. But right now, through social media, it is more direct, and it, of course, happens faster. And the second issue comes down to migration. A lot of migrants come to Europe from countries which are not fans of Israel and Israeli people. But of course, it is a very sensitive topic. But the reason I wanted to mention it is because almost none of the delegates at the conference couldn't come up with what to do with anti-Semitism. Everybody agreed that it is becoming a more urgent problem every day. Something surely needs to be done. But unfortunately, Europe didn't manage to find an antidote to anti-Semitism despite all of the decades that passed after the Second World War and the Holocaust. I do hope that at this conference we'll manage to find an antidote or a number of solutions to counter anti-Semitism. And now let me touch upon xenophobia and racism. We are looking at the United States and what the United States is trying to do to counter racism and xenophobia. But let's leave the United States aside for a minute, so let's talk about Europe and Russia. I believe that Russia can be an example for many other countries with ethnic minorities or many other countries which have different religions and confession. I believe in this regard, Russian experience is truly unique and it merits to be studied and possibly even copied. And of course, talking about Russia, I'm not talking about the Soviet times. Back in the Soviet times, of course, we used to close our eyes and pretend that the problem wasn't there. But if we look at our thousands of years of history, we had successful experience combating this. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union, a lot of Soviet citizens ended up outside of Russia, and they do not always look for legal remedies to protect their rights, and unfortunately they are persecuted in the Baltic states or in the Ukraine. So if you open up the Council of Europe's website, then right on the first page you'll see the information that the Council of Europe is the largest human rights organization which also protects ethnic minorities, and the largest ethnic minority in Europe is Romani people. And here I just gave you a quote from the Council of Europe's website. And of course, the Romani people are a very vulnerable group and they need to be protected. But I wanted to tell you about a different issue. When we look at the Ukraine, there are a lot more Russians living in the Ukraine than there are Gypsies living in Europe. And even if we do not use the phrasing ethnic minorities, still Russians are an ethnic minority in the Ukraine. The Council of Europe doesn't see Russians living in the Ukraine as the largest ethnic minority. Why does that happen? Maybe because they're not an ethnic minority, maybe because they've always lived there. That is probably the first reason. The second reason is that they're being ignored due to political intentions, and that comes down to xenophobia, borderline racism. This is a huge problem because here Russia, of course, will have to move forward to protect its citizens, and we will never give up to protect our citizens. Our interests here are not political. Our interests here are humanitarian, and I think that once Europe realizes it, and once Europe protects the rights of all ethnic minorities, including the rights of ethnic minorities living in ex-USSR countries, that will be the day when the relationship between Russia and the European Union will become much better. So I wish all of us to have very interesting and productive discussions on the topic of our conference, and I do want to sincerely believe that there will be a day when we will be able to say that we do not need a conference like this one because we managed to tackle and solve all of the issues. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Konstantin. And we are going to proceed further, and I would like to invite our dear friend and partner, Vitaly Suchkov. Vitaly Suchkov is partner of our conference. He is head of the National Policy and Interregional Relations Department in the Moscow city government.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great honor for me to greet you on behalf of the government of Moscow, and let me state the greetings on behalf of the mayor of Moscow, Sergey. Dear friends, let me welcome you at the third Moscow conference, Protecting the Future. This is the milestone in the life of the capital of Russia, which values mutual understanding, the traditions of the neighborhood of different ethnicities are time-tested and are part and parcel of our megapolis. Now we are making Moscow a place more comfortable for living. We are involved in cultural dialogue, combating ethnic and religious phobias, and protecting the future as well as the present. The government of Moscow here is cooperating actively with Jewish and other NGOs, which contribute a lot to keeping calm and peace in the capital. I'm sure that this conference will facilitate combating xenophobia, finding answers to challenges of the present, and to create a future based on the lesson of the past. I wish you every success, prosperity, and to our guests from other citizen countries, also wonderful impressions from your stay in Moscow. Mayor Sergey Sobyanin. And I would like to inform you that on the 26th of November, we'll have another international conference, Unity in Diversity, and on the 1st of December, will run the forum on mass media. And I believe that the issues we are discussing here will be continued in those forums. Therefore, you are invited to participate in those events and to share your impressions from this conference. I wish you every success. Thank you. Thank you, Vitaly. And now I invite Stanislav Bedkin, Deputy Head of Federal Agency on Ethnic Minorities. This agency is also the partner of our conference. Good afternoon, dear friends, dear guests, dear organizers of this conference. Please let me read the address of Igor Barinov, the head of our department. Dear friends, on behalf of the Federal Agency on Ethnicities, let me welcome the guests, organizers, and participants of the Moscow International Conference on Combating Anti-Semitism, Xenophobia, and Racism, Protecting the Future. We know that the issues of prevention and combating anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and racism are the priority for the entire world community. Russia, which is our multi-ethnic and multi-confessional state, has successful experience in this respect. The country is inhabited by 193 ethnic groups of different confessions, and we admit the right of everyone and anyone to be different but equal. According to our polls, the share of citizens stating the absence of discrimination based on ethnicity, religion, or race has increased in the last years and reached 94%. This is the result of not just the work of the government agencies, but as well as of the structures of the civil society. Therefore, the International Conference Protecting the Future is very important as a forum on consolidation of the representatives of science, of statesmen, scientists, statesmen, and public activists. This will allow to formulate a number of creative suggestions on prevention and combating the negative manifestations. Speaking about combating anti-Semitism, I feel it is important not to forget our shared past, to keep the memory of the horrible tragedy of the Second World War. One of our tasks today is to combat the attempts by neo-Nazis and radicals of all types to turn Nazis and their collaborators into heroes. Unfortunately, we do see these processes in the neighboring countries of the Ukraine, the Baltic states, and some other countries. Another important facet of this problem is the media. Anonymity and absence of punishment gave rise to a number of insults based on ethnicity and race. This showed the need to prevent such manifestations as well as to formate the atmosphere of intolerance to such manifestations throughout the mass media. And in conclusion, I have to say that the abolishment of all forms of discrimination is the very important social program, which is extremely important for the modern society. I'm wishing the participants of the conference fruitful work, new ideas, and great impressions. Igor Barinov, respectfully. And we proceed with our program. We have a very special guest whom we have the honor of greeting here for the first time. Ahmed Obaid al Mansoori, former member of the United Arab Emirates Federal National Council, founder of Museum Crossroads of Civilizations in the United Arab Emirates. Mr. Mansoori, please.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to thank the organizers and everyone who contributed to organizing this, especially the Russian Jewish Congress, for making this conference a reality and bring all of us together to discuss one important thing. I will not talk today about the great initiatives that we have here in the United Arab Emirates, for example, about tolerance and improving the culture of that, embracing everyone. I will not talk about my museum. I will leave all of this for tomorrow. We have a session about museum. We'll talk about these things. But today I'm going to focus on the issue of the problem of, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism. Today we are talking our topic is very important, about combating xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism. But why we are talking about that? We are trying to protect the future of all humanity, not just for, ourselves. The future of our Jewish brothers and sisters, the future of all minorities and other people in the world. Also, we need to protect the future of, to provide a platform, a better platform for future generations. As we clearly realize that the dynamics of social attitudes in our contemporary world has been very, very difficult to measure, even difficult to follow. Also very difficult to lead the attitude unless it is for short-term or for spontaneous thing. The multipolarity of the social attitudes and dynamics of their multiplying trends has been one of the biggest challenges in many aspects, especially challenges in areas of combating or containing xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism. Unfortunately, added to that, the racists and people who short-sighted do not realize that civilizations rise and demise. Racists' wishful dream is that they will always rise. They forget that they are living on the edge of a ball that rolls constantly. Having said that, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and racism are traits of insecure and incompetent individuals and groups, which can be treated from its roots, especially if it's detected earlier. Therefore, the future of the world, of the whole world, requires that we put our differences aside. We learn the art of co-opetition, how to positively compete and at the same time cooperate. We have to learn from the business schools. We have to learn from the culture. We have to learn how we have to rally all of our efforts and relevant resources, being intellectual, legal, economic, social, and political, to make a unified global agenda and strategy that involves all actors and all legitimate non-state actors and individuals and friends and people. So we can to combat the challenges of this dilemma of racism and anti-Semitism that really led to the violation of rights of individuals and humans. Today and tomorrow, we are so fortunate to listen to experts and practitioners about practices to combat and prevent xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism. To learn about roots of anti-Semitism and xenophobia, and to learn more about the causes so we can study them to provide solutions. Also to learn how to fight against challenges, to improve our communities and societies for a better world for the generation. However, before that, if I may, I would like to emphasize that we need to develop key strategies, a multi-sectoral level with multi-disciplines, including education, psychology, sociology, cultural sectors. The key strategy will also, with unified leadership, we need to have a leader for such strategies to combat and prevent such dilemma that we are all suffering from it. The strategies must be very futuristic, but to be capable to assess and to learn from the past, study the root cause of anti-Semitism that led to such crimes against humanity, against the Jews in the Holocaust. Strategies that focus on values of multiculturalism and openness and accepting different perspectives and embracing. And how can we spread that? How can we have strategies to spread that? How can we also show the beauties and the differences, the beauties and the diversities? Also, the strategy that can be inclusive. We have to have everyone be involved in it, so we can build a sense of ownership. Also, the strategy must be, comprehensive and well balanced, and capitalize on the different programs, good programs in different countries and different regions. And also, we have to work on the legislations, on the legality. And it's very important to hear cooperation with the United Nations and interparliamentary unions, where we have people to work on the laws to prevent such things. The strategy must also be dynamic and, and cope with the contemporary world. At the same time, we should speak to the language of contemporary generations, because many people are, with the globalization, with the multiple interests in the world, many generations are not focusing on these things, the future one, the current one. And also we have to capitalize on such strategies, how to support, all of the positive initiatives that combat such challenges like, anti-Semitism and different that. Also, we have to have the courage to work on changing certain, working certain definitions, like tolerance, like normalization, like, anti-Semitism. We have to make sure that, we have to spread and educate, work on the strategy and awareness. So, last but not least, I'm not going to talk about other things, but I would like to talk about two initiatives were beautifully to capitalize on, especially in Europe. They should also capitalize. Although the strategy came from the Middle East, between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, also the United States was involved in it, but we need to capitalize on the Abrahamic Accord. The Abrahamic Accord should be a catalyst project that can be used and led, in the world. How can we make the best of it? It's a serious project. And the peace, it's a peace between two mature, two strong countries, and also other countries who are joining that. So how can we capitalize on that and go further with that? Also, would like to I'm going to talk tomorrow more about my museum. The Crossroads of Civilization Museum is the place where we have the first initiatives, for rebuilding the Abrahamic tent and, focusing on historical kinship and also to build the best future and by alliances. So there are lots of ways we can work on, and I hope success for the conference, and thank you very much for having me here today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al Mansoori. Thank you so much for your kind speech. Мы переходим дальше, и у нас
we proceed with our
есть
conference.
еще два потрясающих спикера. Я уже
great
все устали, я
speakers.
понимаю.
I know that you're all
Два
tired.
человека, но
We
я
have
уверена,
two
что
more
вы
speakers,
очень
but I'm
захотите
sure
послушать.
that you would
Первый
love to hear
это
them.
специальный
First
докладчик
is
ООН по вопросу о свободе религии и убеждений.
UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or
доктор
Belief,
Ahmed Shaheed.
Dr. Ahmed Shaheed.
Дайте нам, пожалуйста.
Distinguished participants,
Мы не
ladies
слышим.
and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to address the third Moscow International Conference on protecting the future, combating xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism. 2 years ago, I appeared before the UN General Assembly to deliver my report on anti-Semitism as a distinct global phenomenon and form of xenophobia and racism. Since then, I have been pleased to hear from policymakers, human rights defenders, and members of the Jewish communities from around the world on positive steps taken. Several states and other actors have endorsed the IHRA working definition. Educational programs have taught students and teachers about how to identify and tackle anti-Semitism. And states have created special envoy positions on anti-Semitism. While I welcome the progress made, I am deeply concerned at the many challenges that remain and are emerging. Globally, numbers of anti-Semitic incidents remain high, and online anti-Semitic hate speech has risen persistently and alarmingly in recent years. This increase in anti-Semitism represents a wider uptick in global intolerance, spurred on by increasing globalization and resistance to rising demographic diversity. Advances in global communications have meant that we are more digitally connected than ever before, but also more divided as hate speech against Jews spreads with increasing speed, frequency, and geographical reach. Hatred, prejudice, and intolerance travel from online to offline environments and vice versa. The torrent of online hate is correlated with a drastic surge in real-world acts of harassment, vandalism, and violence against Jews, Jewish community centers, and synagogues around the world. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, anti-Semitic rhetoric online has become even more pronounced in many countries. There are numerous reports of anti-Semitic rhetoric on social media and in traditional media outlets, promoting both age-old tropes about Jews and outrageous conspiracy theories that attributed responsibility for the COVID-19 pandemic and its spread to Jews. The anti-Semitic rhetoric and incidents seen over the past year have included notable examples of Holocaust distortion and denial, including in some cases by government officials and state-sponsored media with particular effect on young people in many countries, as well as distortions of the Holocaust scope and intentionality during public demonstrations in the context of the COVID-19 public health crisis. As I stated in my report on anti-Semitism, there is not a more graphic example than the Holocaust of how religious and racial hatred can lead to genocide and destruction of societies. When left unchecked, distortion and denial of the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews, alongside members of other targeted groups, were murdered in a uniquely brutal, systematic, and state-sanctioned campaign, can undermine states' ability to protect and promote human rights. We face emerging and renewed challenges to combating anti-Semitism, especially in its contemporary forms. It is both a pernicious and pervasive phenomenon occurring across the political spectrum, ranging from the left to far right, amongst white supremacist groups and members of radical Islamist groups and media and society at large. To effectively confront and combat anti-Semitism, we must be able to identify it. For this reason, I have consistently encouraged the adoption of the IHRA working definition to identify different forms of anti-Semitism and the context where it occurs, using a human rights-based approach. States must make combating anti-Semitism a top priority to ensure that Jews live not only free from hostility, violence, and fear, but also can enjoy all human rights and fundamental freedoms, including freedom of religion or belief. The work of civil society organizations like the Russian Jewish Congress and the World Jewish Congress is fundamental to this effort. As monitoring mechanisms for hate crimes are non-existent in many states, there is a serious need for investments in education training at all levels in identifying various manifestations of anti-Semitism and of other hatred. I also encourage states to also work with civil society actors and Jewish communities to develop strategies to support victims of anti-Semitism. As I prepare my follow-up report on anti-Semitism to be delivered to the UN Human Rights Council in March next year, I recall that anti-Semitism presents serious challenges to the elimination of all forms of intolerance, hatred, and discrimination based on religion or belief. Such hatred poses risks to Jews and members of minorities everywhere. It is toxic to democracy, impairs the fostering of mutual respect among citizens, and is a challenge for societies everywhere. Anti-Semitism must never go unchallenged. I reiterate calls for states to adopt a human rights-based approach in combating anti-Semitism, as should be done in combating all forms of religious intolerance. I also highlight the importance of solidarity amongst various groups challenging racism, xenophobia, and other forms of prejudice and discrimination. Let us collectively reject anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred and create inclusive societies that uphold human rights and security for all. I thank you for your engagement with my mandate to date and look forward to future collaboration. Thank you.
Спасибо, мистер Shaheed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shaheed. And we have the last speaker for this session, but last but not least, we have Veronica Michelle Bachelet-Heria, who is the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights.
Amid the turmoil and crisis the world experiences, as a result of the pandemic, there also appears to be a rising tide of racism and xenophobia across every region, with frightening implications. Despite the commitment made by governments and the principled work of many activists and human rights defenders, racism and other forms of discrimination, including anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, are an everyday experience for many people. Racism does not only permanently and unfairly harm the individuals who are targeted, it does not only create terrible inequalities and grievances, it impedes the fullest possible contributions by everyone to society's goals. Discrimination and hatred have negative impacts on development and the formation of a cohesive, resilient society based on mutual respect. Faced with humanity's triple environmental crisis of pollution, biodiversity loss, and climate change, and hampered by the social, economic, and health impacts of the pandemic, our only hope to survive and thrive is to come together across all continents, nations, and perceived differences. These massive and global problems need a one humanity approach, one humanity united by awareness of the need to protect our shared future. I am grateful to the Russian Jewish Congress for organizing this event, because it so effectively frames some of the world's most serious and pressing concerns today. The United Nations deeply opposes all forms of racism and discrimination. Both the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights were conceived out of the Holocaust and the two world wars, driven by the urgent need to forever prevent such horror. In these two great founding documents, the world's leaders acknowledged that only justice and respect for human dignity, equality, and rights can ensure enduring peace, and that notions of state sovereignty must never again be used as an argument to mistreat any people. Anti-Semitism, which has given rise to centuries of pogroms and Holocaust, must never again be allowed to harm our fellow human beings. Yet the Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief has noted that, and I will quote him, manifestations of anti-Semitism can be found in the deep layers of many cultures, in the traditional platforms of extreme right-wing parties, in the statements and writings of political, intellectual, and artistic figures, and in the increase in the number of attacks on places of worship and culture." End of quote. The current pandemic has further increased manifestation of anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination. A survey across 16 countries in Western Europe, commissioned this year by the Action and Protection League, found that almost 1/3 of respondents in several countries felt that Jews will never be able to fully integrate into society. A similar number agreed that there is a secret Jewish network that influences political and economic affairs. The spread of COVID-19 has been fueled precisely by the inequalities that are generated by discrimination. And in a frightening feedback loop, it is also further exacerbating discrimination. Countries in every region have seen a sharp increase in the number of hate crimes, including a rise in violent attacks on people of East Asian and Southern Asian descent in many regions. Online hate and racist conspiracy theories are where this violence begins. Words have consequences. Just like in the 1930s, lies, hatred, scapegoating, and dehumanization are a grave threat to our social fabric today. So we need to push back against hatred, against lies. We need to ensure that public discourse is based on facts, which objectively reflect the truth, including the fundamental truth of our equality and universal rights as human beings. Even today, and perhaps especially today, this message is yet to be fully absorbed by a growing number of leaders. Nationalists are once again stirring up discrimination, hatred, and violence against vulnerable scapegoats. Ordinary people openly follow their example from classrooms and workplaces to sport venues. We at the United Nations will continue to oppose incitement to hatred and violence and to stand up for the rights of every human being. For example, the Faithful Rights Framework, supported by my office, aims to encourage religious leaders of every faith to work together to foster respect for diversity in societies that uphold the dignity and equality of everyone. We have also developed a 4-point agenda on transformative change towards racial justice and equality. It makes urgent recommendations to dismantle systemic racism and to ensure the accountability of law enforcement officials and in criminal justice system. It adds concrete measures to make sure that the concerns of people of African descent and all those who stand up against racism are heard and acted upon, and that legacies are confronted, including through accountability and redress. We must learn the lessons of past tragedies, such as the Holocaust. We must push back against today's monstrous denials of human rights, which create more victims and generate more threats to peace. The solemn promises made by every state to respect the rights of minorities and uphold fundamental freedoms and protections are the only way to build and protect a future that is peaceful and prosperous. I take this opportunity to commend the Russian Federation's clear stance on the inadmissibility of racism, anti-Semitism, and xenophobia. I encourage sustained efforts to ensure that everyone in the Russian Federation is effectively protected from discrimination and intolerance. Every individual is worthy of rights, and every society needs to be able to count on the full contributions of all of its people. I thank you for your attention.
Дорогие друзья, я Анна Бокшитская,
My dear friends, my name is Anna Bokshitskaya. I'm the Executive Director of the Russian Jewish Congress. And with this, I would like to
Уважаемые дамы и господа, вы смотрите трансляцию 3-й Московской международной конференции по противодействию ксенофобии, антисемитизму и расизму «Защитим будущее». Секция скоро начнется. Перед началом прослушайте важную информацию о трансляции. До начала трансляции и в ходе нее вы можете менять язык с русского на английский и наоборот. Чтобы выбрать язык трансляции, нажмите на кнопку «Руенг» в правой части экрана плеера трансляции и выберите нужный вариант. Если у вас есть вопросы к спикерам или модератору секции, вы можете написать в чат секции. Ваши вопросы могут быть озвучены в ходе секции. Вы можете переходить в залы других секций. Для этого вам нужно перейти по ссылке на трансляцию около интересной вам секции в программе конференции, которая идет в это время. После этого вы перейдете в выбранную секцию. Вы можете переходить между секциями, когда захотите. Если вам понадобится техническая помощь, вы можете направить сообщение по электронной почте или написать в чат секции, в которой вы находитесь. Благодарим, что присоединились к онлайн-трансляции Третьей Московской международной конференции по противодействию ксенофобии, антисемитизму и расизму «Защитим будущее».